Okay, so hello and welcome to this interview hosted by the wonderful people at my POV Online who have really helped me over the last few weeks. I've been reaching out to individuals who over the last few years have inspired me back at that time, but have continued to inspire me and really inform my lens, my current lens in the work that I do. My name is Goulden. I'm a former police officer, having spent 30 years working in the Scottish Police Service and the last 10 years working with the Scottish Violence Reduction Unit. And it was during these last 10 years that I started to meet many of these individuals who have really, as I said, shaped my lens, shaped the narrative that I talk about today. And I often think my role is about how do I help other people's narrative and their lens? How do I shape, how do I learn from, we spoke to Jackson Katz in the last talk that we did, and Jackson's helped me inform other people who have, hopefully they'll go and inform other people as well. And that's what this is about. It's about really just coming together with some wonderful people who are doing some fantastic work, not just in the UK, but in other parts of the world as well. And today I'm delighted that Tony Potter from A Call to Men has agreed to come and into my house to speak to me today. And it was during my time with the violence reduction that I first met Tony. And I think it was Kay Clark from A Call to Men in the UK who introduced us. We spoke at a conference. You did your bit, I did my bit, and learned loads that day. But it was that night. I remember we went out for an Indian meal. I think you like Indian food. I remember that. And I remember during the meal, I asked you a question, and the question I asked you was, I was very early on in my work, and I asked you the question, what's the best way to engage boys and men in the prevention of violence? And you looked at me right in the eye and you said, Graham, you need to meet them where they are at. That was the words you used. So Tony, welcome. Fantastic to have you here.
Thank you, Graham. Good to be with you, brother. Good to be in your presence again. And I do remember that time. It was a good time. I enjoyed working with you and meeting you and all.
Yeah. And why did you respond in that way? You know, you said meet them where they are at.
Yeah. And that hasn't changed. And that was a minute ago. How long ago was that? I don't recall, but it's got to be 6-7 years ago, something like that. Yeah. And that's still the reality today. You got to meet men where they're at. Men are at different places in these conversations, these realities, this social change effort. And you can't expect men to be where you're at. You can't even expect them to be close to where you're at when you engage them. You got to have the ability to meet them where they're at as it relates to what they know, what they've been taught, what they believe it means to be a man, right? I got to meet you there and then start a journey with you forward. If I'm going to have expectations that you're going to be close to where I am or my thinking, and that's really more about me than about you or the work. Because if I have an expectation that you're close to me in my thinking, or that you have to be close to me in my thinking before engaging you, that's really about my comfort. That's not about the work. So it's really, really important that I'm willing to meet you where you're at. Now, that's frightening to a lot of men because the belief is, first of all, in many respects, those would be communities of men for some of us that we're afraid of, right? We got to own that. In another respect, many of us who are doing this work as men have a fear that if I meet you where you're at, that I'm joining arms with you, that I'm colluding with you, and you don't have to do that. See, I really believe, we at A Call to Men firmly believe that you can meet men where they're at, and you can be very loving and kind and accountable at the same time. Yeah. You don't have to co-sign nonsense or inappropriateness, but I don't have to, be rude or mean to you in that process. So we can have a very accountable relationship, interaction, where I'm firm on what I believe. Yeah. Right? And at the same time, I could be loving and respectful to you in that process. that's required to meet men where they're at. And many of us are challenged by that. And I will say that all men are not willing or able to engage with, men in various circles. Like, and there might be a little bit of a uniqueness on men who are able to do that, to work with athletes who are, very alpha male, go inside of prison systems and work with men, right, who are men that stereotypically we're supposed to be afraid of, uh, or to go to a boardroom and meet with men who are supposed to be powerful and high in intellect, supposedly, uh, work with police officers, and all that comes with that. So you have these various categories of men that many of us are frightened by. And I get that for various reasons, but they can't be ignored, right? They can't be ignored. They all have to be, this is a collective response, right? Our socialization as men is a collective experience. And so there needs to be a collective response. And there's one more thing I'll say about that, Graham, is that within the community that you serve, now my organization, the Call to Men, we're a national organization, but we work a lot with men organizations who have a community response, a local organization. And so let's say you have a local organization in the UK and you're like right outside of Manchester, right? Now, you're cool with those suburban areas outside of Manchester, but your area of concentration also includes some of the inner city of Manchester, right? You don't want to work there. Yeah. And that's where you're going to find, for this example I'm giving you, that's where you're going to find a lot of Black and brown men in those communities. Now, if you're only going to work on the suburb of the city, which is largely white, and you're not going in the city, which becomes much more diverse, what you are in essence saying is, I'm invested in ending violence against women in the suburban area of Manchester. I'm not invested in ending violence against women in the city of Manchester. That, you need to just get honest with that. And because if you're not going to engage the men that they're in relationship with, that they're in community with, if you're not going to engage those men, then you're not working on behalf of those women, right? And so, yeah, and I can understand meeting one segment of men where they're at might have a different challenge than meeting another segment of men where they're at. But that's the deal, nevertheless, and that's the reality.
Yeah, and that's something which really stuck with me. It's something that before then, I used to get a lot of pushback from boys and men in the work I was doing. I still get pushback just now because you're right. There are some men who are not in that space, and it's a question I'm going to ask you later, as we go through this session. But I remember a quote from the civil rights activist Malcolm X, which basically said something: "Don't be in such a hurry to condemn a person just because they don't do or say as you think." Because there was a time when before I met you, I was a different person. And me now is completely different to the person I was 5 years ago. So I can't expect people to be right on that same page of the book. And that's what I took from that, is that we're all at different stages of the journey. But we also need to realize that we can't just stick to our own little groups to engage men. We need to be thinking wider. The prevention of violence requires societal responses rather than just individual and community responses. So thanks for that, Tony. And your TED Talk, which the Man Box, the TED Talk, which has been viewed many hundreds of thousands of times around the world. It's used a lot in this country to talk about some of the issues that boys and men face. But when you did that talk, take you right back to that time. What was your aim? What was your intention behind the TED Talk?
So that was in 2010.
Yeah.
Right. So that's 10 years ago. I was just sharing the message of a call to men and what we do and why we do it the way we do it. The truth of the matter is, I didn't know a lot about TED Talks at the time. And now everywhere I go, I hear about TED Talks. But I didn't know a lot about TED Talks. And they had shared with me, they said, if you do this and you do this right, you will have the opportunity and impact on the world.
Yeah.
And I did not realize that their reach was to that extent. And it's very, very true. I've engaged with people all over the world as a result of that TED Talk. And what I just wanted to do was just get the message out, man, that, as men, we're in this collective socialization, and at a call to men, we call it the man box, right? And how this socialization, right, is not only creating the fertile ground, that's, supporting this epidemic of violence against women and girls, is killing us as men too. I just wanted to get that message out. And I wanted the message to go out in a way that, as we already shared, that it was a loving message to men, but an accountable message. And I wanted to be really, really clear that in that message, I was not defining men solely as the problem. I was defining us as instrumental to the solution. I wanted to be clear that the large majority of men are not abusive, physically abusive, right? But we had to really grapple with, how is it that a minority of men, still a lot of men, but a minority of men in comparison to the rest of us, how is it that this minority of men is perpetrating an epidemic of violence against women and girls on our watch? How is that happening? And that we as men have to grapple with that. That's the message that I wanted to get out, that we as men have a responsibility to grapple with this reality, even though we're not the perpetrators of the violence, but it's something about the collective socialization of what it means to be a man that is allowing that to happen. And so we have to really grapple with that.
Yeah.
And that was really the essence of the message.
Yeah. That's a powerful word, grapple with the problem. You were very honest in your talk, about some of your experiences growing up. And you talked about the boys around you. Do you think the other boys that you talk about were struggling with this? I think I've heard it being called the mandate of masculinity. This idea that to tick the box, the mandate, I need to be tough, aggressive. You talk about not showing emotion. Do you think that the other boys were grappling with that at that time as well?
I firmly believe that, and I believe it still today. I believe all of us are grappling with it at different times as we're making decisions. We're grappling with the anxiety of, this is not who I am or what I want to do, but this is who I need to be in the sight of others. We're always, in many cases as men, we're negotiating this man box. Now, some of us are doing it on a more intellectual level because we have a high level of consciousness of what's going on. Some of us are doing it where it appears to be subconscious, but we're getting this gut reaction or this like pull and tug inside of us. We might not be able to, really lay it out and explain exactly what's going on, but there's emotions that are moving us into different directions as we also grapple with this man box, right? I could be sitting in a pub, right, with 3 other mates, and I see someone getting ready to act out with a woman. There's a pull and tug inside of me, and I might not know anything about what we're talking about, but there's a pull and a tug inside of me as to what's righteous and what's not. What's righteous? What's the right thing to do in this moment, even if it's not what I've been taught I should do, right? I've been taught I should mind my business. It's him, his wife, and his girlfriend, and it's none of my business. That's what I've been taught. Why have I been taught that? Because I've also been taught that women are the property of man and she belongs to him. So that's the socialization. But then there's also the part of me that understands the difference between right and wrong. That's also like, struggling. So even when we don't have a clear understanding of how this socialization works, I think we're grappling, as we mentioned earlier, there's a pull and a tug inside of us. So as boys, there's a pull and a tug. Sitting, with a group of boys, and one boy had sex with a girl in the neighborhood, and he's sitting with the group of 5 or 6 of you, and he's telling you all about her.
Yeah.
She doesn't know that he's doing that. She didn't give him permission to do that. There are some boys in that circle that are laughing and tell me more. There's also a boy in that circle that knows this is wrong.
Yeah.
And he's grappling with, should I tell them to stop? Should I tell them that this is wrong? Should I just be quiet and not say anything? I'm not going to laugh. I'm not going to act like it's funny. But do I have a responsibility to challenge it? So it happens on all levels for all of us all the time.
I've been doing some work in prisons over the last year, and I show your TED Talk in prison, but I always start the conversation before I show the TED Talk is like, tell me about you as a man. What type of man do you want to be? And I've kept this. This is a bit of flip chart paper, and some of the qualities that the men wanted to be. They wanted to be an inspiration, a role model. They wanted to be authentic, respectful, be a good dad, be like my dad, be honest, have purpose, be healthy. And so this is the grappling, isn't it? Inside a lot of men, boys and men, are good, healthy values. But when they are placed into a situation, especially in a prison, where this man box is even tighter and smaller, because the question I asked them is, okay, that's you, that's what you are, that's what you want to be. What's your challenges? And they just looked at each other. And it was like the flicker, they knew exactly what I was going to with this conversation was, we're all challenging each other. That's the grappling. And it was just one of these experiences where I showed your TED Talk, Tony, and at the end of the talk, the young men were in tears. The prison guards were in tears because it was the first time they had a conversation about what it is that they want to be as a man, but with the realization of the challenges. It's not just me that's having the challenges. We're all facing the same challenges. So we're building the team. And why do you think boys and men feel uncomfortable stepping outside the box, especially when they're with their male friends?
Well, you said something that's paramount in all of this is around being authentic, right? That's the challenge for us, to be our authentic selves. And stepping outside the man box is being our authentic selves. It's being our whole self versus a role self. And the role is what socialization says we should be. Our whole self is being authentic. What I think it is, Graham, and so much of how we're taught to define what it means to be a man is to distance ourselves from the experience of women and girls, right? So if women and girls can share feelings and emotions, men can. If women and girls can ask for help, men can. We have this stereotypical myth that women are weak, meaning then that men are strong and tough, or we at least have to pretend to be, all right? Women need to be protected, another myth. We as men need to be protected. So you can't be a man and need to be protected, right? You can't be a man and need to be protected. Men will really, not really, but far unlikely to call the police when they need help, right? Because we believe we're supposed to be able to handle our business, right? Be in control, handle your business, be in control, be on top of everything that's going on is your responsibility. We talked about, you can't share a lot of emotions, can't share a lot of feelings, get yourself. I remember talking to some men in the UK, and I was sharing about my son and telling him to get himself together, right? And I said to the men in the UK, how do y'all say that? Because I love the Queen's English, right? And what they said back to me is, sort yourself out.
Yeah.
Right? Sort yourself out. You know, you need to be under control, in control, sort yourself out. Is the same way in the States we would say, get yourself together. And so this is instilled, ingrained in us as men, and of so much of it leaves very, very little space to just be who you are, right? To just be who you are. So as men, we're always grappling with that. And when we can be who we are, you know, as I said at the end of the TED Talk, there's some beautiful freedom there, man. When you can like just exhale, you know, and just be who you are, right? There's tremendous freedom there. And then there could still be, and in our society, there's also consequences when you choose to just be who you are. And we see that as well. But that you know, that whole in the box versus out of the box, you know, that whole thing, it has a lot of challenges for us as men. But the whole idea of being this man box is also extremely homophobic, right? We say homophobia is the glue that keeps the man box together,
Yeah.
right? So when you look at the power of homophobia, it's so important for men also to have a lack of interest in the experience of women and girls outside of sexual conquest, because if you have too much interest and is not aligned with sexual conquest, then your quote unquote manhood is in question, homophobia is in play. And so we're taught to have a lack of interest. It doesn't mean we don't love the women in our circle, our family and all, but it means women in general, we're not supposed to be interested in them unless sexual conquest is a goal. So you got all of this stuff going on that's ensuring that we distance ourselves from the experience of women and girls. And that requires us to stay locked into the man box. And anytime you're outside the man box, being your authentic self, your manhood is in question.
Yeah. And I think it's something that, I often get people telling me, the man box isn't a healthy conversation to be having. It's so outdated. In the UK, we have 13.5 men every day take their own lives. 13.5 men every single day in the UK take their own lives. Our prisons, 95% of the prison populations are boys and men. If you look at our drug deaths, homelessness, again, it's boys and men. And I think I just tell people we need to talk about this stuff. This is so important that we talk about the man box. Why do you think some people in society are still reluctant to talk about it? Men, especially.
Yeah, part of it is change, right? Because to talk about it is almost a process of change, right? Just having a discussion lends toward a process of change, a process of knowing, right? And once you know the challenges that come with that, right? So I think there's a reluctance to change, to knowing, that comes from conversing and sitting and discussing. There's to sit and discuss, even if you're on a different end of the thinking, that in itself is someone who has some level of investment in learning and possibly changing.
Yeah.
So I think there are challenges for men there. But to your other point about the man box being outdated, some folks might think it's outdated if our conversations just continually stay around ending violence against women, because they want to say, we got that, we know that already.
Yeah.
But to your point, this box is killing men. It's not just about the impact on women, it's killing men.
Yeah.
One of the basic tenets of this box, firmly ingrained in this man box is men can't ask for help, men can't offer help, and men can't accept help. Be it homelessness, be it suicide rates, be it when you talk about mental health, we use it as an equation. When you think about the man box and in its socialization, remember we was talking about how men are socialized to do the opposite of what women do in distancing ourselves. So women can share feelings and emotions, men can't. We grow up as men really denying all emotions with the exception of anger. And in that denial, we don't get to explore or know ourselves emotionally speaking. So we grow to be adult men with extremely limited emotional intelligence. And I think a recipe for disaster for us as men is when you connect limited emotional intelligence with the inability to ask for help. When you put the two together, it becomes very, very clear the mental health challenges that we have as men, the high suicide rates. And I can think back this, and there's a cultural component for me as a Black man. One of my very best friends, and then I could think about men in my community in general. A guy who's like, doesn't talk much at all, ever, right? Would be seen as a cool dude, right? Cool guy. He's chilled. He's that's real manly of him, the fact that he rarely ever talks. Because again, women talk too much, right? So you put him on the opposite end of the spectrum where he doesn't talk much at all. He just always just laid back, just chilling out. We look up to him. But the reality is, he probably got some serious mental health challenges. Could be clinically depressed.
Yeah.
But we're not making a connection around that, right? Clinically depressed. That's why he doesn't talk to anybody. Yeah. But instead, we see it as something to look up to. Yeah. So this man box, with all the challenges it has on the lives of women, safety, self-determination, equity, equality, is killing us as men too. So we are far from a place to stop talking about it. We have to continue not only to talk about violence against women and girls while it remains at epidemic proportions. We have to really look at the role it plays, in mental health with men. And we haven't even talked about trauma yet, right? That's a whole nother conversation.
And we've touched on that before in other talks. Is that, to me, that's a perfect storm when you bring in early years trauma into the man box sphere. It's a perfect storm for all the issues we've talked about. And I remember watching a few years ago. I've seen the film many times. That film, A Few Good Men, with Jack Nicholson and Tom Cruise, and I think it's the courtroom scene where Tom Cruise's character says, "I want the truth," and then Nicholson's character says, "The truth, you can't handle the truth." Right. I think that's a little bit at play here. That a lot of men see their friends behaving abusively or being homophobic or sexist. They know the issues, but they're really uncomfortable. And I think the role that we have, Tony, you and I, and other men and women who are doing this work, is how do we help people move from this place of discomfort? I'm not pointing fingers at you, to a place of action, of anger. I'm angry at what's going on in society. I have a role to do something. And your TED Talk really, for me, started to cement my role as a man to get more involved in these issues. It helped me move from a place of discomfort to a place of action. But yeah, you're right. That's another conversation that we could be having around trauma. And it's an important conversation that thankfully we're having. We are able to start, walking and chewing gum at the same time. We can talk about men's accountability, but we can talk about why people might be behaving in certain ways. It doesn't mean we let people away with things and they're not held accountable, but these are two conversations that we need to be having into society. So I think to really bring that to that part of the conversation, we've covered a lot in that. And I wanted this first session for people just to, and we'll post a link to the TED Talk. If you haven't seen the TED Talk that Tony did, go and watch it. And if you're working with young men and young women or anybody in society, use the TED Talk to start the conversation about the issues. As I say, and Tony talked about, it's about showing respect. You know, when I did that work in the prisons earlier this year, I started off from a place of respect. Well, I asked them, right, okay, tell me about the person you are. What do you believe in? Why do you get up in the morning? And that, what I found with that conversation, I got all those wonderful traits: being respectful, being authentic. That's what I want to be. Start from that conversation. And then I asked the next question I asked the group was, what's the challenges to being you, to being the authentic you? And as I said before, they just looked at each other, and it was like something flicked in their head, and they understood what was going on. And I often talk about, there's an American wrestler called Mark Miro, and there's a TED Talk he does, or there's a talk that he does where he's speaking to an audience full of 14, 15-year-old American school kids, and mixed gender group, young men, young women in the room. And Mark's talk is about his life as a wrestler, a pro wrestler, and how he focused so much on his sport that he, missed his family, and so much so that he eventually got the phone call saying, "Your mum has died." And when he started talking about that, all the girls and young women in the audience were in tears, in bits. But when you looked at the young men in the audience, they were scared to make eye contact with each other. They wanted to show emotion, but they couldn't show emotion because they were fearful of being called out by their friends. It was such a sad thing to happen. It's a sad thing to see. I watch a lot of these talks and movies and things now where I see things so much differently. And in that talk, the main story is Mark Miro's really compassionate story about why we should all be focusing on our family. And I saw the man box at play in that short video.
Those boys listening to this man talk, the girls are full of their emotions because we've given them permission in society to fully experience their emotions. The boys are in a place of a dilemma, right? Because they feel it, but they've been taught to perfection to not allow it to not show it. We start telling boys to stop crying between the age of 3 and 5, right? By the age of 10, they usually have perfected it, right? To feel stuff but not show it. They don't perfect it immediately, but we keep drumming it home every time it shows up. It takes them about 5 years. And so what we see is around the age of 10, in the States, that's the 5th grade in school. And I know your school system is a little different. But by the age of 10, they usually have perfected it, that they can lock it down, they can feel it and not cry, right? That they can lock it down. That's how, and once they lock it down, it stays down, right? And there's only certain occasions where it has permission to come up, and it's killing us as men.
Yeah, and that word grapple in that film. That's what the boys were grappling with, their authentic selves and the expectations being placed on them by their friends. But this has been ingrained in them time after time by society.
And if the girls are crying and I cry, which is what I really want to do, I'm no longer distancing myself. I'm right there with them, right? And that's a big no-no, right?
Big no-no.
And I will pay for this later on, because there will be boys, we're in this session, but when we come out of this session, I'm going to pay for this. If I expose myself that way, I'm going to pay for this. And I might pay for it for the next 5 years. They'll remind me of that day, right? And so when we lock it down, we lock it down.
So thank you for doing that, Tony, for the first one. When we come back and talk more, I want to be more solution focused. What's going on? We'll talk about work that I'm doing, importantly, what work you're doing in the United States, and what needs to happen, and what do we need from boys and men into society? So thanks again, Tony, for that first conversation.
No, I appreciate that.